We're going to look at this from three different angles right now. Lester Kivett is our parliamentary reporter. He'll talk to us in just a moment. Standing next to me is social media analyst Tebogo Ditsejo and also reporter Kailihle Khumalo, who is outside the U.S. Consulate in Sandton. Lester Kivett, good afternoon to you. Let me start with you first of all. Nomvula Mokonyane saying Donald Trump's tweet has not determined our approach to SA-US relations, but no doubt there is a degree of tension that exists between Washington and Pretoria this afternoon.
That's right. I spoke to not only to Nomvula Mokonyane, but also to Parliament's International Relations Committee chairperson, Siphosizwe Masango, who says that US-South Africa relations are still strong and that this tweet won't do much to affect that very good relationship. But we must remember, President Donald Trump's tweets do have real-world ramifications. If you can remember, just last week or 2 weeks ago, the US president tweeted about Turkey, and we saw a devaluation of the Turkish lira, which had a ripple effect on emerging markets, South Africa being one of them. So as a result of that, South Africa lost quite a lot of value against the US dollar. That then was then passed on to South African citizens when it comes to the petrol pump. So President Donald Trump's tweets do have effect and do have real-world implications, but Nomvula Mokonyane is saying that they're not losing any sleep about it, and that South Africa and the United States relations still remain strong. This is also as the International Relations Minister, Lindiwe Sisulu, issuing a statement a short while ago, saying that while the comments by Donald Trump are unfortunate, that she will be making a phone call to the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to seek clarity, as well as to finalize or underline South Africa's current policy, and that the debate regarding land expropriation without compensation is, while still ongoing, it will follow constitutional and legal principles, and that while that process is still being debated in the halls of Parliament, that nothing yet is finalized when it comes to a more effective land reform project in South Africa.
Lester, did she say anything about AGOA? We know that this is the US-South Africa trade agreement. Again, on the surface, it might appear that this could put some strain on that particular dynamic.
Definitely, South Africa the United States rather is South Africa's third largest trading partner, and that any implication with AGOA could have significant effects on the South African economy. If you can understand that AGOA can be rescinded at the stroke of a pen, of Donald Trump's pen, and we are quite seeing that Donald Trump is using trade and tariffs as his chosen weapon against countries that he seems dissatisfied with. If you can understand his current trade war happening with China and various other markets when it comes to the imposition of tariffs, and there is a concern regarding where AGOA stands at the moment. It is expected to be re-looked at and re-signed in 2019. So those negotiations are still ongoing. We've tried to get some comment from the Department of Trade and Industry and Minister Rob Davies, but we've been directed to go through the channels of the Department of International Relations, and that was a statement that was issued by Minister Sisulu, that while the comments from Donald Trump are unfortunate, that SA-US relations are still intact and they still remain strong. What Nomvula Mokonyane did say is that South Africa could have done a whole lot more to spread its message across the world. More could have been done by the Department of International Relations, the DTI, as well as Brand SA, in marketing South Africa's current land reform plans. This after lobby groups like AfriForum have gone to various countries, including the United States, and visiting that Cato Institute, which Donald Trump and Fox News heavily reference in their report on South Africa and land reform, saying that the DTI, DIRCO and Brand SA could have done and can do a whole lot lot more to setting the record straight, going to its instructing its international missions to approach their host countries to set the record straight and detail just exactly what South Africa's policy is when it comes to land reform. I understand that earlier this week that the Australian High Commissioner had met a delegation from Parliament and Parliament's International Relations Committee, also seeking clarity on South Africa's land reform project. And this is what Nomvulo Mokonyane says should be done more, sending that message across, countering a narrative by groups like AfriForum that there is that land expropriation without compensation is happening at a wanton basis, and trying to set that record straight in international missions around the world.
All right, Lester Kivitt outside the National Assembly, thank you very much indeed. So let's take it now from Cape Town. Let me take you live to Sandton in northern Johannesburg, where you see our reporter Kailihle Kumalo standing by. He's outside the US Consulate. Kailihle, one imagines that behind those closed doors and also at the embassy in Pretoria, there is much discussion. Has there been formal response so far from US authorities in South Africa?
Jeremy, so far, the very last word we had from the diplomatic mission of the United States here in South Africa, they've said there may be a statement issued out during the course of the day, but for now they haven't really given out any fleeting reaction. And we know when it comes to land issue in South Africa, it's a very contentious issue. And also we've seen the Department, for example, of International Relations and Cooperation issuing out a very strongly worded statement. So we know that there will be an engagement with the US embassy officials in Pretoria just to thresh out and really just to get a clear understanding, given the fact that the department is stating explicitly that the tweet is premised on a very false information regarding, of course, for example, the whole issue that the Constitution has been already amended, which is, of course, very much incorrect. There are still processes underway.
At this point, though, we don't know when that engagement might take place or what the nature of the engagement is, or for that matter, who would be part of that particular dialogue. At this stage, we are still awaiting a more formal statement from the US Embassy.
Very much so, Jeremy. We're still waiting for a very formal statement from the side of the US Embassy. And we know when you look at the bilateral relations between South Africa and Washington, they seem to work in a number of areas. For example, when you look at the HIV program and, of course, AGOA, which is a preferential trade agreement, they seem to have very stable relationship. So, by all means, this tweet, it appears to be very crude and very much ugly to some degree as well. So, and also in terms of the statement from the side of DECO, it's not really giving a clarity as to which delegation, for example, they'll be meeting, which is it composed of? Will it be the second in command? Because we know here in South Africa, since the Trump administration took over, there hasn't been an ambassador, really taking over. We only have a second in command. Once again, perhaps pointing to his foreign policy when it comes to Africa, especially a very influential country like South Africa. So, and also just in terms of the tweets, Jeremy, there has been quite an outburst really expressed when you look in so many fronts, and lots of people really outraged by the degree and the message that is contained in the tweet, especially because it's based on fallacy.
We're going to look at that social media component in just a moment, but Kailihle, very quickly, as far as the US Consulate is concerned, I'm assuming that it is business as usual. People will be queuing up outside as they do from early morning every day to procure their visas, and obviously no sign of any protest action.
Well, that's a true reflection, Jeremy. It's absolutely smooth in here. People are just coming in and out, seeking all sorts of consular services. So no demonstrations expected at this point.
All right, Kailehle Kumalo outside the U.S. Consulate in Sandton, that is north of Johannesburg. So Kaya was reflecting the power dynamic as far as social media is concerned. Let's explore that now in a little bit more detail. Social media analyst Tebogo Ditsecho is with us. Tebogo, good afternoon to you. And again, this illustrates, this one tweet late last night, South African time, it illustrates the power and influence, doesn't it, of social media?
Yes, because Donald Trump's tweet has gone viral. It's now the topic for discussion in social media across the globe. There are many countries that are appalled, especially particular social media users within those countries. And obviously the majority would be from South Africa, in terms of, finding it difficult to understand how could a president of the United States not have all the facts correct, with the resources that he has from the State Department and the CIA.
Have you had an opportunity at this point to look at some of the analytics as far as this is concerned? What sort of take-up has there been, and perhaps what sort of response and the tonality of the response are you gauging?
Well, the tonality of the response, very, very surprisingly, is overwhelmingly negative. Whether it's in the United States or South Africa. You do have a few users who would be, emboldened and relieved by what President Trump said, because they would also be scared, that perhaps their land could be taken. But over and above that, people do understand, that there were injustices of the past that need to be corrected. I think that perhaps we could do more in terms of communicating how the mechanics of this is going to work, so that we can allay fears and actually bring everybody on board to this.
That's a similar sentiment to what was expressed by the communications minister, saying perhaps the whole debate around land expropriation should have been communicated better. So going forward, as a result of this particular issue, what does South Africa do? Do we go to war on Twitter against this, or are there better ways of doing it?
Well, we do have to use all mediums possible. The biggest stakeholder that we should be looking at is South Africans, and looking at beyond the continent and the world. So we should be tackling it from a community perspective, speaking to the people on the ground, bringing an understanding, also getting their input in terms of how the mechanics should work, and then communicating that to the globe.
But that's not necessarily confined just to social media messaging, is it?
Absolutely. You cannot just confine it to social media, because it is, just a percentage of South Africans who are on social media. It's less than 35%,
Finish your thoughts.
So you're going to move, into communities, looking at billboards, looking at pamphlets, looking at releases, and also doing community engagements at various halls, to speak to the community about this, because a constitutional change should involve all South Africans.
In terms of the tweet itself, and we know that the US president tweets oddly, extemporaneously, all the time on different issues. Does this really, within the United States of America, have the power to influence change, or is this simply something that is known, appreciated, and acknowledged by his own base or his own community?
Well, I think the impact of this in the United States will be that it will open the debate. And I think that is one of the positive aspects, in that people from the United States will now discuss what is happening in South Africa. They'll be looking for the facts, they'll be looking at the injustices of the past, and debating from their perspective how it should be addressed. Now, currently, it shouldn't be addressed in a manner, in that it creates conspiracy theories. As you saw on Fox News, a lot of those things are not true. The Constitution has not been amended, land has not been expropriated, and it is not color-based currently. We actually have to look at all the dynamics, and I don't think a lot of people are aware that there's a lot of land that is unaccounted for, and that is the one that perhaps would be prioritized in terms of land expropriation.
But the danger of something like that is the seed has been planted. For many people now, that almost becomes de facto the truth. It becomes a lived reality for them.
Absolutely, and I think we need to stop the guessing games. You know, everybody, all the political parties, all the stakeholders, even in the private sector, need to make it clear to say this is where we stand on the land debate, these are our contributions, so that everybody can know exactly where they stand. Even if you stand in a position that is a bit compromising, you will know that this is where I stand, and then how are you going to alleviate that?
When you have an issue like this, which has flared up so quickly on Twitter, what's the life cycle of something like this?
Well, it can last a very long time, you know, because people are going to remember that on this day, Donald Trump decided to tweet about South Africa. You know, I think it is big. Perhaps you can look at approximately 3 days. I was very surprised that racist tweet using the K word lasted more than 3 days. But it opened up a national dialogue looking at the solutions to that. So I think Saturday would be perhaps the time when it will start dying down and something else will rise up.
Which also suggests then that if we're going to, as a country, react and recalibrate on social media, we have 48 hours in which to start re-messaging.
Actually, we have a bit less than that because the interest wanes from hour to hour. And I'm very happy that the South African government did respond. And I think that was more of a holding statement, that they reject all of these inaccuracies, and that this is how land expropriation without compensation is going to be rolled out. But I think we need a more comprehensive response, perhaps an even admitting that there's a shortcoming when it comes to communicating about the processes, and go a bit harder, you know, on different platforms, being more mechanical and being more effective in how we are reaching our target audience.